Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the City Council Urban Affairs Committee to order. We have two items on our agenda. The first is order number 23-108-965, communication from Attorney Brian Falk on behalf of Somar Landscape Incorporated to construct and operate a landscaper's yard at the Airport Industrial Park, 59 Airport Boulevard, Unit 16. I believe Attorney Falk is here. We're going to take up that order first, then we'll move on to our second order that I will read when we get to that. I do apologize. I know that there was a piece of paper sent out by the secretary. There are actually two corrections that are made to what was sent. One is a simple change on page 1 under the findings of facts number 5. That says the last revision date on the Cornerstone Engineering in the October 17th should be October 13th. And then you have the information where on page 2, it should read engineering dated October 17th, 2023. Otherwise, Attorney Falk, we'll let you say anything you want to say, and then we can go through the permit and see if anybody has questions or concerns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I mentioned during the public hearing, the draft additions.
As long as the light's on.
The draft decision you have before you is nearly identical to a special permit that the council granted in 2021 for the neighboring unit at number 17. So we, aside from updates for the applicant and the plans and dates, the conditions are virtually identical. Staff site plan committee reviewed the draft decision and had no comments. They'll see this again when we come forward if the special permit's granted for an update to the overall site plan approval for the Airport Industrial Park.
All right, so I will see, does anybody have any questions before we just go through this? Councilor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to say overall that I think that the ongoing development at Airport Boulevard is good for small businesses in my part of the city, and you know, this is very straightforward. Small business contractor, this is what it's there for, so I don't see any immediate concerns with anything that's been shown up so far.
Thank you. I will just quickly then go through the actual decision on the special permit. Page 1 does have the findings of facts with the corrections that I just went through. We will note that on page 2, the public hearing numbers needs to be filled in, but I think we all know that is 0. We can get to page 3 where we actually do the grants the applicant a special permit for the landscape contractor's yard. Subject to the following conditions, the construction in accordance with the applicable laws is pretty standard. Number 2 is site plan review. Again, the issuance is further subject to detailed site plan review by the Site Plan Review Committee. No final occupancy permit shall be issued until the applicant has complied with all conditions, provided, however, that subsequent to the issuance of this special permit and site plan approval, the Site Plan Review Committee may authorize the phasing of site and building work depending upon weather conditions and other factors, which reminds me that I didn't go through the information we received from the department heads where nobody had any comments except for the building commissioner, who did indicate that he would want to be able to make changes in the future if it was needed. So that was my bad for not going through that. Number 3 is the modification of the plans. So again, notwithstanding conditions 1 and 2, the City Council or Site Plan Review Committee may approve engineering plans. Number 4 is incorporation of submissions, so everything we have, the plans, photo rendering, site evaluations, briefs, and other documentation is part of the application. Number 5 is stormwater and erosion management, which again is pretty standard, and I think the engineer is pretty up to speed on making sure that all of those buildings are conforming. Number 6 is fencing. The applicant shall install solid fencing to screen areas of the site used for the storage of vehicles, equipment, and materials from the street and adjacent properties, and shall maintain the fencing in good repair. The fencing shall comply with the requirements of all applicable city ordinances. Number 7 is outdoor storage areas. Accordance with section 650-18A-48 of the zoning ordinance, the outdoor storage of vehicles, equipment, and materials shall be located on impervious and otherwise dust-free surfaces. Materials shall be stored with sufficient protections to avoid damage to landscaped areas and to avoid interference with the proper functioning of stormwater infrastructure. Lawn areas shall be separated from adjacent parking storage areas with curbing and barriers to prevent the use of lawn areas for materials or vehicle storage. And the bulk storage of bark mulch at the site shall be subject to fire safety conditions approved through the site plan review process. The site shall not be used to store grass clippings or similar debris. And I think that's been standard on all of the landscapers that we've done. Number 8, indoor storage areas. Building areas used to store vehicles, equipment, and materials indoors shall be equipped with floor drainage systems designed to prevent fuel, oil, and other hazardous material from entering the stormwater or sewer systems approved through the site plan review process. Number 9 is vehicle repairs and maintenance. The site may not be used for major repairs of vehicles and equipment, but minor maintenance of vehicles and equipment which are exclusively operated as part of the use may be performed indoors only, subject to condition 10, which is the noise and air quality. The applicant, its successors, and/or assigned shall comply with the city's noise ordinance and shall comply with all state and federal requirements governing air quality and emissions. Number 11 is lighting. The lighting at the site shall be downward facing and shielded to minimize impacts on neighboring properties. Number 12 is compliance with applicable laws, and number 13 is the recording of the decision, our standard note in all of these special permits. So if there's no questions on the language, I would entertain a motion. Councilor Doucette?
Motion to approve order number 23-1008965.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the special permit and the grant of a special permit and the decision. Is there further discussion? Councilor Oram?
Thank you. I appreciate the work that goes into these conditions, including the storage of grass clippings, working in the public health field. It's a horrible smell once it starts to decompose, so I had issues where I used to work, so I appreciate that being in there. As well as drainage, we talked about that at the last when we met at the city council meeting. And the plan done by Cornerstone, it shows a silt fence around any storage. That's a good situation, and I know the building commission will probably look into it, but the storage of mulch shouldn't be more than 10 feet, because then you create heat in the center and can cause a fire. So, but a well thought out plan at city council. I'm not on the urban affairs committee, but I will be supporting it based on the work that was put into it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Oram. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are no opposed. It's a 5-member committee. All right, I will report this out. I'm not sure, is there a building there, if I'm remembering correctly?
This building is not there. It's
Okay,
a
so
vacant
he's-
pad site right now.
All right, I would guess he probably wants to get going as soon as possible. If there is approval by the body on Monday, I will ask for suspension to have this referred to the solicitor, make sure it's in proper form, and we could vote on it in our the meeting after that.
Great, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Attorney Falk, for your work. All right, the next item on our agenda is order number 23-100-8941. This is a communication from Attorney Gemma Cashman on behalf of Trammell Crow Company regarding a proposed amendment to the City Code, Chapter 650 zoning by adding a new section to create the Sassaville Way Residential Zoning Overlay District. I know there are quite a few people here. Attorney Pizzoni is not here. He is, I hope, recovering well from some recent knee surgery. So if you want to stand, you can. We can, I guess I didn't realize that the chairs weren't there already. Whatever your preference is. I will just say, when I talked to Attorney Pizzoni, my plan for this meeting was not really to talk about what you want to build, but really discuss more detail on the language of the overlay. I know you did send a document this evening, which we were asked to make sure you had a computer because our city clerk is not here, so it's not up on the screen to help view. I will leave it up to the committee, I guess. I would, if they want to see it, I will certainly let it happen. Otherwise, I would really just rather get into some of the discussion and the meat of why we're really here. So does anybody want to hear the new information on some of the changes that they've made to their plan? Councilor Doucette.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would be interested to hear what the plans are as far as what they're proposing, just so I get a better understanding of it. You know, there's still issues with the location. Overall, I was impressed with the project, but not, thought it was a bad location, so I'm curious to hear.
So I know you sent the document. Did you print out any copies, or is everybody just really going to be looked at? Sometimes it's easier to look at things on a screen anyway that look much brighter and...
We do have copies, so we can pass them out now.
All right, if you want, wouldn't mind doing that, and anybody that does have their document, whoops, I didn't want to do that. It's unfortunately, we will not have it on the big screen for the public to see what we're talking about. I will say, I believe this is all the information that was provided at the recent planning board meeting. Nothing's been changed since that meeting.
There might have been some slight updates, but it's all consistent with that, and maybe I could just briefly introduce sort of where we are. So my name is Michael Flannery. I'm an attorney at Goulston and Storrs. Together with our co-counsel at Dave Pittman, Bill Pizzoni, and Gemma Cashman, we represent Trammell Crow Companies, who are the proponent of the proposed Sassville Way residential overlay district. As you mentioned, Madam Chair, Bill's unable to make it tonight, but sends his regrets and his regards to everybody. We are very grateful for your time tonight. We know there are other pressing matters you have this week, so we are going to be as concise as we can and are happy to, of course, answer any questions you have. I'm here with a few members of the development team. I'll introduce them as and when we need them to answer questions. But what we want to focus on is modifications we will be proposing to the proposed zoning amendment, and to the extent you want to hear it, updates we can give you about the conceptual project plan that is consistent with those modifications to the zoning. All of these modifications and conceptual changes are the product of several weeks of outreach and discussion with neighbors, with city officials, including conservation agent, conservation commission, city engineer, as well as our first presentation to the planning board. And we'll get into a little more detail on those. If you look at, it should be on the second page of the handout. It's slide 3, and I realize this printed in a way that may be difficult to read, but I want to point you to that slide. This is a summary of the modifications we will be proposing to our zoning amendment. We hope to make a formal filing as soon as tomorrow, but wanted to have a discussion and get some input from this committee tonight before we did so. I just want to highlight a few of these, if I may. We are proposing to increase the amount of affordable housing that would apply within the overlay district from 10% to 12%. Based on the project plans, that would equate to an additional 6 affordable units at the project. That's in response to some feedback we heard from the council, as well as others. We are also took a look at the feedback we got, took a look at conceptual design of the site, and are able to consolidate, we believe, in a responsible way, consolidate some of the land disturbance and the ultimate development footprint of the project. So we're proposing a reduction in the maximum lot coverage from 50% of the site to 45% of the site. That will dovetail in with the advancing design we have for our stormwater management and our water quality system, which we know are very important, not only to us, as we hope to be the owners of this project when it leases up, but of course to our neighbors and to anyone who uses the lake and the reservoir. We also have heard concern about potential impact on school resources and costs to the school system. We have some analysis we would be happy to share either tonight or soon after. We think the impact, generally speaking, on school enrollment is going to be fairly minimal from this project. However, we think it'd be responsible to propose something that wasn't in the original draft zoning, which is a cap on the number of 3-bedroom units at the site. We understand 3-bedroom units are most likely to generate school children as residents, and we want to be sensitive to those concerns. So we're proposing that cap. We're also proposing a reduction in the number of dwelling units per acre. This is also in the chart here, from 15 units to 13 units. This is actually, we looked at some other multifamily projects that have been approved, some constructed, some under development in the city over the last several years. This puts the density of this project really at the lower end of those other 5 or 6 projects, and we'd be happy to share more details about that. Also, if you look at our site, which is about 22.3 acres, and you look at the building density of the project proposal, we're coming in at about a 0.4 FAR. We think that FAR, if you measure the floor area ratio, is actually comparable to some of the surrounding areas, and in particular, the density you could get in the surrounding residential A2 district. So again, if you look at the site as a whole, we think the density is actually fairly in line with what our neighbors have. And finally, I want to address, and this is honestly for discussion and feedback, when we were in front of the full council, we heard from the chair of this committee in particular, there was concern about being able to do as many as 300 units here without a special permit. That's what was proposed in the original draft zoning. Going through this process the last several weeks, we didn't hear that specific concern so much, but we heard a general concern that aligned with that, which is if this rezoning is approved, how do the neighbors, how do the city make sure that the project is done the right way? And we have done our best to answer those questions. A lot of those answers, though, depend on the kind of site investigation, the kind of detailed design that developers will only do after something like a rezoning gets approved. And to the extent people are feeling like a rezoning is the same thing as a project approval, we've revisited the question of a special permit, and we're very open to a discussion with this committee, with the full council and others, about what is the right threshold here for a special permit. Obviously, a special permit process gives the city much more in the way of tools to make sure that the project is, as I said, done the right way, particularly with respect to stormwater management, water quality, some of the other concerns that we've heard people express over the last few weeks. So at this point, we'd be happy to take questions about the zoning modifications. We would also be happy to give a quick update on the conceptual site changes, although without having those on the screen, it might be a little bit difficult to get, but very much defer to the committee about where to go next.
And on that note, do you have extra copies of this? It was suggested that and I know you probably don't have one for every member of the audience, but because it's not on the screen, I can certainly give up mine because I've got it where I could look at. But do you have other copies we could pass around? At least I can put one out there. Leave it for you to take it home. You have a copy? Karen, you have a copy for the records? Okay, well, just make sure you keep it. No.
Aaron, do you have one for Mike?
All right, so you have heard their changes. They're kind of throughout the whole part of it. For me, as I stated at the public hearing. I am not in favor of this project if it does not have that the housing is by special permit. I can't make that change as the chair. I'm not sure if I'm in favor of it at all as a overlay that would allow what they want, but I'm still open to be thinking about it. So I don't know, do you want them to go through some of the rest of the changes? You all have it either on a piece of paper or on the computer, or do we want to get into discussing some of the issues? And I guess I'll just throw out there, I know the planning board needs to give this body a recommendation. I'm not sure what that's going to be, but I think because we are on a time crunch, this body has a couple of options. We can have our discussion tonight, and we could then add it to the meeting on the 15th, so that, hoping the planning board does actually make a decision on the 13th, we can take this up. We could decide tonight to just refer it with no recommendation back to the full council, where it would then just lie on that agenda until the planning board recommendation comes in, where it could then be taken up as a total body for discussion. So that's kind of where I am at the moment. I did see Councilor Naven's hand first, so I will go to him for comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to have probably several as this conversation goes on. One of the things that I want to mention is you had just mentioned your concerns about having a special permit, and it was addressed during the presentation. I think one of the things that concerns me most is we have learned, at least I have learned in my 4 years here, that a change of zoning often does mean somehow a project approval. When housing is changed to be allowed by right, whether there's a special permit or not, we have seen projects move forward, even when this body has not been in favor of them. So I take a little bit of a reservation here. This housing is not allowed now by right, and we are here to discuss just the zoning, not the project. And we're always told to remember that we're not here to talk about the project. However, you guys have done a fair amount of work to present a project of which we can envision should the zoning be changed. We know that once that zoning changes, you just said it's, people say that it's a project, people confuse it with being a project approval, but it's a way for us to make sure the project's done right. I hope the project's done right either way, whether a special permit is required or not, in regards to stormwater and some of the other environmental sensitive areas up here. But it really is concerning to me because we are making this decision to allow housing to go here. And the special permit later is fine, and I would certainly appreciate to have another bite at the apple. But if there are people concerned about housing going in at this spot, deferring that concern until a special permit, I would say, is a little bit too little too late. So that is kind of where my concern lies, and which is why I think, and a lot of the rest of this committee and the council as a whole feels that it deserves quite a bit of review, because this is our opportunity to make sure we shape what we want in this part of the city.
That is true, and I guess I will throw out, if you don't want any housing at all, then don't approve the zoning change. It's that simple. Councilor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I love the project. I hate the location. It's one of those. I think that if the zoning changes here is the postage stamp zoning, whereas basically changing the zoning for one lot to enable this development, which usually if you do zoning, it tends to cover more than one lot in a bigger area. So, I tend to be cynical about postage stamp zoning to begin with, because you're just hitting this one spot, and what I don't want the zoning to do is then enable something we have no control with, because then we let the genie out of the bottle. So I think having some follow-on control, if even it was approved, would have to be something as far as if housing was allowed, if you want to see wording to make the housing require a special permit, then so be it with the words as so moved, and we can work with that. But again, the question is whether or not this is something that as a zoning change, should we allow this type of project in this area regardless, considering the issues as far as the cold water sources and everything? And I'm not sure if I still agree if that's the right place, the right development for the right location.
I think they go hand in hand for discussion. Does anybody have any specific questions, thoughts? Counselor Oram? I did not see anybody else, so, Counselor Wagner?
The part that what I'm struggling with this, and I'd like to, how more information, like hearing from planning, what I'm struggling with is it is light industrial zone, so what could end up going in there by right? This is a project where I'm seeing the developer wanting to work with us, and I don't have the answers right now. I would want to know what can go in here that doesn't have, this is a very sensitive piece of land, but the more control and the more we can spell out specific requirements rather than, we hope you do a good job and don't ruin the land, be very specific. So whatever controls we have to put in place, that we can make it so spelled out and in a way that's informed what will work on this land that won't damage the asset. Because I wish we could just buy it. I don't think the city is going to buy it. It's a very valuable piece of land. So we're left with something's going to be developed on it, and I would rather work with a developer that seems to care and is going to work with us and make sure what goes there won't harm the land than just letting it go. So I guess that's what are the steps that gives us the most control over, and the most going slow enough that we get the most information so we're making informed decisions about how we move ahead?
I would say that we would get the most control by making it a special permit so that we can put conditions in there. We could reduce the number of units. We could do all kinds of things with a special permit. I will, just to make sure that everybody is aware, if this doesn't get approved and there is a future limited industrial project that comes before site plan will make sure that, just like they do with every other site within the city, that the mitigation of the city's resources are taken care of. They're not just going to be able to walk in there and do a project without a whole lot of discussion on the part of the city engineer, conservation. I would guess to make it easier, they would make sure they were they were not within the 100-foot plane, which this group has now brought themselves out of, so conservation doesn't have any impact, but there still are environmental concerns that they would need to. So I think that site plan would make sure that a lot of issues that have been discussed, but I guess I'm not so sure that if we don't do this, that we can't have a conversation with Boston Scientific on buying the property. It's not, I know it got mentioned at the planning board that there was a property for $5 million and the city didn't take it up. It wasn't the city, it was the mayor. The mayor had right of first refusal and he said, I don't want it. Well, who knows what will happen in the future with this piece of property. Councilor Navin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, and I do just to respond, I think Councilor Wagner makes a good point, about, making sure we have the controls about what goes in here. I do think one of the things we want to be careful of, and we hear this a lot as a council, when people, developers and other business owners and property owners come in here because they want to build a nice-looking project that happens to have a different zone in it, and we get what I believe is a false choice put to us, where they say, yes, you can build, this housing if you make these changes, otherwise look what you could get, and in the first proposal, that Tremel showed us, right, it shows by right, you can build max out a 150,000 square foot warehouse with parking, that nobody wants and that scares everybody, which is a fair point, it can go in by right. That has, to my understanding, that has never been proposed on this parcel of land. In its history, I think there are 3 projects that have been proposed on this parcel of land over the past 30 to 40 years. They've all been housing. I do not believe that Boston Scientific is looking to have a limited industrial user come in and build on that land. That is my opinion, again, like other folks' opinions, that this, could happen. So, we do see that. I think we should be very cautious that we should not be making the choice just to say, okay, we should let this go in and craft it because it's the better of the two options, when quite frankly, the other option may be that it's going to continue to sit there because this body refuses to zone it for housing. That is not a surefire way, and as the chair mentioned, the mayor has the opportunity, and we are about to see an administration change. I'm not going to put anybody in this chamber on the spot, but it is interesting to know that two of the people that sit on this body, one of them will be sitting on the 4th floor next year, and I think that they hear these concerns. And so I just don't think we should rush to make this decision to change the zoning because we're afraid of what could go there when we have heard no intent from the current property owner that they want to sell the property to someone who would build a limited industrial. We have not heard from the property owner that they want to expand on their footprint. But I do agree for what Councilor Wagner said. If that does come to us, of course, we want to make sure we are being safe. But I think that's a false choice. Thank you.
Any other comments from anybody? Councilor Orem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You had mentioned, if I have a question on the maximum combined lot coverage. I see here it says 50%, and I thought I might have heard 40%, but here it says 45%.
If I said 40, I would have misspoken, but the
Okay.
proposal is to reduce it from 50 to 45.
45, okay. And I see on affordable dwelling units, under our zoning laws, we say 15% under 650.26. I see you originally proposed 10% and looking at 12%. Was there any consideration for the 15% that's required in our zoning laws?
So I think the consideration was looking at other overlay districts having lower than 15. And apologies, I can't spring one to mind at the moment.
Okay.
But the consideration was looking at those and originally believing a 10% amount would be comparable. But 12% after getting some feedback seems like a more appropriate number, and if folks want to continue that discussion, I'm sure the developer would be open to it.
Okay. Well, thank you for the clarification and the answer to the affordable housing. I agree with you that this body has approved less than the 15%, but I can assure you I was one of those councilors that voted against it. I believe the city needs affordable housing. It's obvious. Our own families can't stay here. Our own workers can't stay here. I think it's time we start taking care of our own as well as the needs of Boston Scientific and others, but I'd like to see the 15%. But in way of comment, because comments have been made, I cannot support this, and it's based on my background in environmental health and public health, and the well-put-together letter from the residents in the area about protecting this very important watershed. Not just the watershed itself of how the water drains through the forest, but also the fact that you have a canopy there, keeping the area cooler. So it was well said at the Conservation Commission, as well as from our residents that live around there. And as just a point of information, I'm a street off the lake. So I've always been concerned. I was the Ward 6 councilor years ago, and I would not support a project like this back then or now based on location. As Councilor Doucette said, it's a nice-looking project. It's just not the right area. And I think Councilor Navin said, and I'm in agreement with him, that as it relates to limited industrial, that doesn't scare me, because when that comes in, I will be speaking to make sure the environment is controlled. So unfortunately, I can't support this based on its location. You've made the efforts, and I did point out the fact that I'm not in any way in favor of the affordable housing that you show or the lot coverage, based on the fact it's such an environmentally sensitive area. And I know some of you heard that at the last meeting. I don't need to repeat it, but that's my consideration. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I guess talking about the affordable does bring the issue to me, at least, that if it's by right, when we've done the affordable by special permit is when we can put in the language where the code says that if you don't do 15%, you have to pay the city money for it, and there's nothing in this that then covers the aspect that you are not meeting the code. Or if it was in the special permit, we could write it in. We could also say, no, we want 15%, so that would be a further discussion. I don't know, considering it is 8:30 and we have a lot of discussion on this to go, how much people want to get into the actual language. If you want to think about what I said our options are, we can certainly add it to the next meeting that's scheduled on the 15th. Councilor Wagner, saw a hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It feels premature to go through the details of the language when there's so many questions remaining that I'm hearing. I need more information before I move ahead, so it doesn't feel like the best use of our committee's time to go through details that we're not really ready to be tackling at this point.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to do that, because the actual language has not been discussed at all. It's been focused on the project. Once we approve this, that project could totally change without it being a special permit. So I don't know if anybody else has anything. I'm certainly willing to add this to the 15th agenda. If the council, if the planning board doesn't act on the 13th to give us a recommendation that we would have, it could just stay on the agenda. My concern is this has to be voted on by December 5th meeting, or they start the process all over again, because we're within the timeline. Councilor Dumas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious because you made some changes to the zoning amendments and that we've talked about, but we left out, I think, to me, a very important one, and that would be the 300 dwelling units. It says that you're open to the discussion. Can we just hear more about that? I'm just curious as to why we got to the number 300 and what you can actually, where's the wiggle room, so to speak? Are you open to 100 units, 150 units, or are you dead set on 250 units? So I'm just more curious about that because we did talk about the others, and I'm just, if you could elaborate on that, that would be great.
Yeah, so just for context, so the original proposed zoning had a threshold of 300 dwelling units before a special permit was required. That reflected a belief at the time by the developer that this would be an appropriate site for a site plan approval without a special permit. I think we've learned in the last several weeks that that's not how the city views this site. It's not how the neighbors view this site, and we think they're right. So where is that right number? I'm not sure where it is, but I think there's potentially benefit to all parties in this process if a special permit avenue is open for additional feedback from people, additional study, additional control on behalf of the city in terms of the project design, in terms of the details that are difficult to study at this stage of a proposal. And I think, speaking for the development team, if I may, I think that there's an aspect of wanting to make sure that stakeholders are as comfortable as can be with this project before it breaks ground. So in that sense, a special permit process, could sort of fill those multiple purposes.
I'm not sure you answered the question, though. Why 300? Why not 400? Why not 200?
Initially, why 300?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Initially 300 because we did not envision a project that would be larger than 300 units. We don't think it works on this site. We think that would be really about as dense as you could make this. And again, we thought it would be a site where you could do a project like that and have it go through site plan approval, but we realized that's just not how people view it. And like I said, we think that's correct. So that 300 number, is not it's not relevant anymore as a special permit threshold in our view. So maybe there's obviously some lower number that could get people, we hope, get people comfortable with, you know, making sure that the right size project has to go through a special permit.
Thank you. Did I see another hand? Counselor Doucette?
Thank you much, Madam Chair. I have to thank you folks for being open for negotiations as far as coming in here and, you know, recovering from not understanding the lay of the land, so to say, with the original proposal and being open to changes. I think we need to understand what comes back from the planning board before we go forward. I think any type of housing project that would go here would have to be done by special permit, and we can work on the wording of that on the 15th if necessary. But I'm not sure we're going to be doing anything more tonight. So.
All right, so it sounds like with this gets added to the agenda, if there's nothing final from the planning board at the 13th meeting, it will just stay on the agenda unless there's a decision by the committee to do something else.
Okay.
Madam
Motion
Chair, could I offer one piece of information?
Certainly.
So, as may be relevant to your discussion, we are planning tomorrow to file, wanted to get some input tonight before we did this, but we're going to be filing tomorrow directly with the planning board, sort of an updated description of a lot of project modifications, of the zoning modifications I reviewed briefly with this group tonight, as well as a formal, you know, proposed modification to the zoning amendment. And we intend to send copies of all that to this committee. So very much understand there's a lot of detail you don't have in front of you, but starting tomorrow you should have much, if not all, of that detail in front of you.
Thank you, and I know I did talk to the solicitor today, so if we can get an updated copy of the zoning with the changes, I think input from him would be advisable to make sure that it would not trigger a new public hearing. If you're, depending on what your changes are, so I just want to make sure that we're okay at that aspect. So the sooner we can get it, and I know the planning board left it with lots of questions when they finished their meeting, and it sounded like you had a lot of homework before you. So we will follow through with the decision once we hear from the planning board, since we can't really do anything until then. Councillor Landers.
Madam Chair, one quick question. Planning board, the 13th, that's what you're hoping?
They closed the public hearing, but they left it open for them to have discussion among themselves so that they could get questions answered, be able to have a conversation. And then it wasn't clear. The chair did indicate at that meeting that he thought it would be 2 more meetings, which would mean that it wouldn't actually get voted on until the last meeting in November, but I don't know for sure. So it could be that we're waiting.
And
that
you're
long.
hoping to have an urban meeting on the 5th, Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe that word has already gone out
Right.
to the committee members to check the date, and
It's already
pending,
scheduled.
following that, then I think it would be the last 3 days in this November, because I will not be around. So we may want to plan on the 28th and 29th or 30th. So we could meet, make a recommendation on the 5th. So just keep that in the back of your minds going forward. All right, is there anything further you would like to give us as information, or? No, I know you have a lot of people. I'm sorry that the screen is not available to show. As I said, I think if you want to see it, you can watch the planning board meeting, because a lot of the pictures were the same, so you can kind of see the diagrams and the change that they made to the actual development. All right, with that,
Motion to adjourn?
been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no opposed. So we are adjourned at 8:33. Thank you very